up with a joke using gnats? Huh? Gnats are not funny. Okay.
No, they're not. But they taste pretty good.
Yeah, but you just gotta have a lot of them.
Hey, a bunch of them in the Army.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you gotta have a lot of them. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our next verses. Let's just read through. If you want to follow along, we'll be in Exodus chapter 8. We're going to look at verses 16 through 19. So the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, raise your staff and strike the ground. The dust will turn into swarms of gnats throughout the land of Egypt." So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded them. When Aaron raised his hand and struck the ground with his staff, gnats infested the entire land, covering the Egyptians and their animals, and all the dust in the land of Egypt turned into gnats. Okay? Pharaoh's magicians tried to do the same thing with their secret arts, but this time they failed. Now remember, they did the blood thing, they did the frog thing, but now here we come to the gnats, and they can't do the gnat thing. Okay? And the gnats covered everyone, people and animals alike. "This is the finger of God," the magicians exclaimed to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He wouldn't listen to them, just as the Lord predicted. All right, so let's talk about gnats for a minute. The Indians like to call gnats no-see-ums, right? Because you can't see them; they just sneak up on you. In the King James, this word is translated as lice. But in the ancient world, okay, the word is a bit more universal and could mean any small biting insect. So what we consider a gnat today, right, a teeny tiny little biting fly, if you were in ancient Egypt and you said a gnat, it could mean any number of little critters, okay? Lice, fleas, gnats, mosquitoes, well, they were all included in this term. So when the scripture refers to this, it's not really clear whether it's referring to one of these or all of them, right? It wasn't so much which one as it was the coverage, okay? Now, most translators today, they believe this gnat was a mosquito. Now, not saying that it was, okay, but they think that it was probably a mosquito. So you think about how many people have ever been bit by a mosquito? How many people have ever been bit by a couple of dozen mosquitoes? Yep. Okay, so just keep multiplying up the problem here, all right? So while Egyptians living along the Nile would certainly have acquainted mosquitoes or were acquainted with mosquitoes, this infestation would have been exponentially greater than anything ever experienced before. Okay? So this was not something that was normal. This was something that was much larger than they had experienced before. Okay? So the description here that we want to focus on that's used by Scripture is covering the people and the animals, covering them. How many
frogs did that?
Huh?
The frogs did that.
The frogs covered the land. They just hopped on the people. The mosquitoes, they ain't buzzing around the ground. They're on the people. Okay? Now, again, the term covering the people is one of the reasons, right, that it leads the scholars, the studiers of the Scripture to go to mosquitoes as opposed to what we consider gnats today. Gnats, at least according to what I was able to read, most of the time when gnats are on you or after you, where are they located?
On the head.
Right in your head, particularly your eyes. And that's because the gnats are attracted to the moisture and the fluid in your eyes. Okay? Have you guys sat through this class before? Is that what
I read ahead.
You read ahead. Oh, okay. So the fact here that they're covering the people and the animals, not just on the head. We feel like the scripture would have said it covered their heads, right? But it said it covered the people, covered the animals. And so that's kind of what one of the clues that lead the theologians and the historians to think mosquitoes might have been more accurate. Okay? Now, again, if you look at, and I resisted the temptation to add this slide into the charts tonight, but if you look at a study of insects, gnats and mosquitoes are only like about 3 degrees apart, right? They're very closely related, even though they look a lot differently. So the term here, mosquito, and they're covering the people. I don't know if you've ever been in the woods without off, right? Off is a relatively recent invention, but I've heard of mosquitoes sometimes being so bad that they'll drive livestock mad because they can't get away from them, right? They're just hovering over. In this part of the country, the Indian tribes that used to be down here, now I'm drawing a blank on what, Crankawal? Anyway, the tribe that used to inhabit all along the Gulf Coast here.
Karen Collin.
Yeah. One of the things they did, because mosquitoes are bad down here on the coast, right? You know why you can go outside this time of year, especially with all the rain we've had, and not be carried away? Because they spray, right? You see the trucks going up and down, fog going up and down the streets, knocking the mosquitoes back. So back in the day, the Indians, of course, they didn't have trucks that would spray. They would use alligator oil. And one early settler to this area said he didn't know what was worse, the smell of the alligator oil or the mosquitoes, right? Because it was ungodly, the smell of this stuff. So we're talking about a whole herd, a swarm of mosquitoes. Now, I think that the comparison to the dust on the ground is important here, right? Because you were talking about, well, we had frogs everywhere, right? So how many mosquitoes must we have at this point? Well, I did a calculation. No, I didn't do it.
I was just going to say, there's no way you can calculate
I didn't do that. I didn't do it. So it said the dust on the ground, right? They struck the dust on the ground and the mosquitoes came up like the dust. So how pervasive is dust? Okay? If any of you have ever lived...
It's in anything.
Yeah. If any of you have ever lived on a dirt road, in summertime when it gets dry, you understand about the dust rolling in, right? You go out, you look at your car, and it's a different color. Well, mine's not because I keep my truck that color, but it's a different color, right? It coats everything. We are talking about mosquitoes everywhere, okay? Now, like the frogs, there's no escape. It's all day and all night, okay? All day, all night. Raise your hands. I want to show of hands. How many of y'all have ever tried to hunt one mosquito in your bedroom after you've gone to bed?
All you gotta do is wait for the and then pop your eardrum.
Right. Yeah. And the mosquito, he busy. He goes over to the other side.
Laughing.
Yeah. So right now, imagine literally thousands upon thousands, all in your bedroom, right? Have anybody? We used to do a little squirrel hunting, and we go down into the bottoms, especially during the summertime, and there was a constant whine If you just stopped and stood still, you could hear the woods making noise. And it was all of the insects buzzing, right? So can you imagine? I want you to get an idea of the misery that the Egyptians are now living through, right? And they're being bit on top of that. Now, barring disease, nobody ever died from a mosquito bite. But if you have any allergic reaction at all, right? I've seen people get bit by a mosquito and they get a little red spot and they scratch it and they're done, okay? But now imagine that everywhere. Me, I get bit by a mosquito and it swells up into a little welt and itches for hours, right? I got to go put something on it. It'd drive me nuts. And I got a type of blood that apparently attracts mosquitoes. So you're welcome. If we're ever out somewhere, you won't be bothered because they'll all be hunting me, right?
Yep.
So, see, she knows. I'll be sitting there swatting mosquitoes. She goes, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "The mosquitoes are everywhere." "There's not one bite me." I know, because
Jennifer's mosquito repellent.
yeah.
I'm my Travis's.
Oh
Oh my gosh, I just got on the cart.
So, yeah, I mean, and they, let me get this out of the way. Is that okay? Can you see past that? Okay. All right, so also, I want you to pay attention that while the water and the frogs did not directly harm, I mean, it's not like the water was acid, right, and burning people when it touched them, and the frogs weren't running around, biting people.
No, but they were in the food.
They were in the food, but they weren't hurting people directly. The effect is now changing. People are being bitten, okay? So it has become, in other words, if you look at this, God keeps upping the ante, right? Okay, you're not paying attention? Now I'm going to, first I'm going to inconvenience you. Then I'm going to annoy you. And now I'm going to aggravate you, right? Because this is aggravating, and these mosquitoes biting you. So they didn't directly harm. God is escalating the plagues now. And there's a direct impact to people, but no one's dying. Yet. No one's dying, okay? So the mosquitoes do not have malaria or West Nile. Of course, this is the southern Nile, so, but there's none of this that's going on, okay? So also, we talked about this, the magicians cannot reproduce the miracle. Now, one of the reasons that they can't reproduce, because remember, they're relying on trickery, right? They did a thing, and they said, "This is pure water." When they poured it out, it was red. Oh, look, we did it too, right? They could pull a frog out of their hat, right? They say, "Oh, look, poof, a frog appears," right? Actually, they had a big stone, and they broke the stone opened a little box, and a little frog jumped out and, "Hello, my darling. Hello, my baby." So you just can't get away from the frog jokes, right? So they can't.
You said last week that they couldn't get rid of God's frogs.
They couldn't get rid of them, but they could reproduce the miracle. They could make a frog appear. Okay? But this time, they don't know how to deceive. They don't know how to trick Pharaoh into thinking they've produced mosquitoes. I mean, after all, when is the last time you ever gotten a flock of mosquitoes to appear on command and attack people? Right? Mosquito.
That's something I want to try.
Mosquito is not going to listen to commands, right? You can't get them all to hover right here. You guys hover right here. I'm going to hold the little cloth in front of you, and then when I drop the cloth, you fly over to Pharaoh, right? No, they're going to be all over the place. You can't control them. There was no way to recreate this effect, okay? And so the magicians had to finally admit, right? This is God. This is beyond the pale. This is something is extra special, supernatural is going on here. So they have to admit this is a divine act. Okay? This is a divine act. But Pharaoh digs in. No pun intended. Pharaoh digs in, right? He gets stuff. What? You do a series on the Exodus and come up with jokes. Now, Pharaoh digs in. He basically, he doesn't even act like he's paying attention. No, you are not going, right? He just absolutely refuses to let them go. So, again, the utter misery. I just want to focus, and that was God's plan all along. The utter misery of what was going on. Right now, one of the things we don't know, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, is how long this lasted. Right? We don't know whether it's 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, or if it followed the 7-day template that was established in the first couple. So he says, no, you're not going. The next thing we've got to consider here is there's more in play than just mosquito bites. Now, mosquito bites would have been enough, right? For most of us, we'd been like, take you and your mosquitoes and get out, right? Go away. Take the mosquitoes with you. Pack them all in your trunk. I don't care. Get them out, right? Pharaoh digs in. He says, nope, there's no way. But there's more in play here than just the mosquitoes. Note that Aaron struck the ground with his staff. Now remember, when he attacked the water, when he plagued the water, what did he do? He stretched his rod out and he struck the water, right? He put his net in the water. And we talked about the Egyptian god that was over the water. Well, when he struck the ground, it was more than just theatrical, and it was more than just, well, look, I'm going to have mosquitoes. The dust is going to turn into mosquitoes, and it's going to come up everywhere. There's more to it than that, okay? There is a god of the earth that was very prominent in Egyptian religious worship, Geb. Right? And he was the god of the earth, or god of dirt. And so by doing this, what God is essentially doing is he's showing them that their gods cannot protect them. In fact, the irony is he's using their gods against them. Right? He's attacking them with their own belief systems, their own belief structures. Okay? So Yahweh, or remember that Yahweh is the great I am, right? I am. He's demonstrating absolute power, absolute control over his creation. And he's doing it in the face of, right, these gods that they've set up. Now, keep in mind that many of these gods, and we'll get to this in a minute, but many of these gods they worship, like we talked about last week with the frog god, right? The goddess that she actually had a frog's head. They depicted her with a frog's head. And so they depicted these gods with attributes, physical attributes, characteristics of the very things that God is using against them. Now, in this case, they didn't have a gnat-headed God, but God used it. They're coming up out of the earth. Your God can't protect you, right? So he's using that to... are you trying to keep from saying something? No? Okay. Because your eyes look like you're about to break out laughing.
The thought of a gnat-headed God.
Okay, so no time limit is mentioned on this one, right? We talked about that.
There was no time limit on the frog.
7 days. We figured 7 days. So, but there's no time limit mentioned on this one. We don't know if it's following that template that he established in the first with the water. 7 days. We don't know if that's become each one of these things is going 7 days, right? Or if there's if this is only going to go 2 days, or is it going to go 3 days? Okay, we don't know. Now, like I said, it's possible, and many theologians believe that the reason that 7 days was mentioned in the first plague is because it set the template. These things are going to run 7 days at a time. What is the number 7?
Number of completion.
Number of completion. Okay? So if you look at the creation of the universe, on the first day, right? God created the heavens and the earth, or God created light. Second day, heavens and the earth. Third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day. And on the seventh day, he rested. The rest period made his work complete. So he worked 6 days, and he took a day off, and that was a complete cycle. That's why it's 7 is completion. Right? So when it was mentioned in the first plague that it ran 7 days, it was a complete judgment, right? God said, this is the plague I'm going to use to judge you. 7 days was the order, right? Because that was a complete cycle. And so that's why they think that even though it's not mentioned specifically, that template is being followed, right? So we need to keep that in mind. Not that it says one way or the other, but we need to keep that in mind, because one of the characteristics, particularly in ancient storytelling, is that a repetitive detail would only be mentioned once or maybe twice. And then it would be assumed you understood that carried on through the rest of the story, okay? And so we have to understand that about the culture that we're dealing with here, right? So it's possible, like I said, it's possible that it's running 7 days. It might not, but there came a day when however long it went, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, there came a day when it was over. And we moved to the next plague. Now, can anybody guess what the next plague might be? Go ahead, say it. The flies. There you go. There's a big hint right here. I'm trying to help y'all. Okay. Y'all must have been a hard day today.
Tough order.
Huh?
Tough order.
Yeah. All right, so whether it was 4 days or 5 days, the next plague finally comes up. So we'll pick up at Exodus 8. We'll look at verses 20 through 32 now. Now the Lord told Moses, get up in the morning and stand in Pharaoh's way as he goes down to the river. Say to him, this is what the Lord says. Let my people go so they can worship me. If you refuse, then I will send swarms of flies on you, your officials, your people, and all the houses. The Egyptian homes will be filled with flies. The ground will be covered with them. But this time I will spare the region of Goshen where my people live. No flies will be found there. And then you will know that I am the Lord and that I am present even in the heart of your land. I will make a clear distinction between my people and your people. This miraculous sign will happen tomorrow. And the Lord did just as he said. A thick swarm of flies filled Pharaoh's palace, the houses of his officials. The whole land of Egypt was thrown into chaos by the flies. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, all right, go ahead, offer sacrifices to your God, but do it here in this land. Don't leave the country. Okay? But Moses replied, that wouldn't be right. The Egyptians detest the sacrifices that we offer to the Lord our God. Look, if we offer sacrifices here where the Egyptians can see us, they will stone us. We must take a 3-day trip into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, just as he has commanded. All right, go ahead, Pharaoh replied. I will let you go into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God, but don't go too far away. Now hurry and pray for me. And Moses answered, as soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord, and tomorrow the swarms of flies will disappear from you and your officials and all your people. But I am warning you, Pharaoh, don't lie to us again and refuse to let the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. So Moses left Pharaoh's palace, pleaded with the Lord to remove all the flies. And the Lord did as Moses asked, caused the swarms of flies to disappear from Pharaoh, his officials, and his people. Not a single fly remained. But again, Pharaoh became stubborn and refused to let his people go, or let the people go. Okay, so, now like I said before, we're not sure if it doesn't talk about the mosquito plague ending, right? So it's possible that the mosquitoes were running for 2 or 3 days, and then Moses showed up and called for the flies, and you had mosquitoes and flies. It's also possible that it ran, just like we talked about, 7 days, and then the flies came, right? We talked about once a pattern has been established, ancient storytellers didn't feel like they had to go back and say it again. One plague rises and then falls, and then another is called for, and again, and repeat, and rinse, and repeat. And so this seems plausible. And the reason this seems plausible to us is that in the very first verses, right, what do we see? We see it says, get up early in the morning, stand in Pharaoh's way as he goes down to the river. Do you remember the first plague? Now remember when Moses showed up the very first time, he met Pharaoh in the throne room, right? And he threw down his stick, and it turned into a snake, and it ate the sticks of the magicians. But when he called for the first plague, where was Pharaoh going?
Down to the Nile.
Down to the river, down to the Nile, right? And so now, of course, the water turned bad, right? Then we had the frogs, and then we had the mosquitoes. Now it seems reasonable to assume the mosquitoes have cleared, because what do we see Pharaoh doing? Going back down to the water, right? So, and he didn't have that dark cloud buzzing all around him as he went, right? He was back into his natural routine. So it would suggest that however long it lasted, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, the mosquitoes are cleared out. They just disappeared as suddenly as they came. And so Pharaoh's like, the mosquitoes are gone. I need to go down to the river. Now, I don't know what he was doing, if he was going to go down there and pray or take a bath, whatever, right? But it was his normal routine, okay? So we see that he's once again returned to his routine. So again, just as we talked, we can assume the mosquito has waned. But the language that God uses now for the confrontation is slightly different. Did you notice that? He didn't say, go and speak to Pharaoh, go and say to Pharaoh, right? What did he say? Go stand in his way, okay? Stand in his way. Standing in the way is confrontational, right? Don't stand off to the side and say, hey, Pharaoh, dude, right? The flies are coming, right? No, what he does is he goes down and Pharaoh can't ignore him. How many of y'all ever seen the President of the United States, any of them, leave the White House and head for Marine One, the helicopter? Yeah, you've seen that a lot on press conferences, right, on the news. He's going, so there's the helicopters over there, and there's reporters over there, right? And he comes out of the White House, and he's headed for the helicopter, and the reporter's over here going, Mr. President, what do you say about this? Mr. President, right? And he just keeps going, right? Why? Because they're not standing in his way.
This is more of a Tiananmen Square type thing.
This is more of 10. Yeah. So y'all see, if y'all remember the Chinese deal where the tanks were coming down the road and that one lady went out there and got right in front of the tank. She's standing in the way. Now, I think that was a little silly myself because, but it wasn't
the same type of power. He could have killed him on the spot.
That's right. The tank wasn't what she was resisting, and it wasn't the tank that she was trying to influence. It was the driver, right? And she did, right? She stood in his way, right? You're gonna run over me. You're gonna look me in the eye, right? And so now I was gonna say in my president's story, I got a big kick out of Reagan. I thought Reagan handled this the best I've ever seen. Because he was headed for the deal and they were hollering about Iran-Contra and they were trying to ask him questions, and he turned and he looked at all the reporters and they thought, oh, he's going to deal with us. And he went, right? Because the helicopter's running. And he's like, I can't hear you, right? And they were shouting and he was just like, can't hear you. Pharaoh cannot ignore Moses if he stands in the way. All right, that's the point here. We have come to have an all-out confrontation. You have to deal with us. You have to pay attention to us, right? So Moses now announces the next plague, and he uses cause and effect language. Okay? He says, if you refuse to let my people go, you will suffer the consequence. Okay? Refuse and suffer. And then, notice, there's no striking the ground, there's no striking water, the staff. Swarms of flies just appear. Just buzz, in they come, right? The ground is covered, the houses are filled, right? They're everywhere.
More protein in the bread.
More protein in your bread. Exactly so. So, right? They are everywhere. So how many flies would it take to fill a house?
Did you count them?
We're just going to say lots and lots and lots. Lots and lots of flies.
You didn't do the math?
I didn't do the math. I was like, no, I'm not doing the math this time. Did the math with the frogs, but with the flies, there's just too many. Just too many flies, okay? So, if you thought frogs were bad, the flies were worse. As a matter of fact, how many of y'all have ever done this, right? You go through a little problem, and you think, man, that was annoying. And then the next little problem hits, and you think, man, this is really bad. I wish I was dealing with the other thing. But when you were in the middle of that, it was the worst thing ever, right? Has anybody ever been there?
That's what I said.
Right?
I bet you the Pharaoh was like, I bet this can't get any worse.
Yeah.
Each time it just
It's
keeps getting
impossible
worse
for
and
this
worse.
to get worse. Oh, don't say that, right? So I'm betting now that they're wishing the frogs was back, right? Because it says
At least you could have frog legs.
well, yeah. Well, you can have
fly legs.
you can have fly legs. Okay, here you go. Fly joke.
Fly pie?
Fly joke. Okay, here we go. You ready? What do you call a fly without wings? A walk.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
Man, that's a tough crowd. Okay.
Worse than last week.
When we thought we couldn't get any more.
That's the point.
Exactly.
That's the point. No matter how bad it is, it can always get worse.
This just flies in the face of all of us.
And I want you to know that was not on my list of things to say. So that's the brother right there.
I've been waiting for that one the entire time. I would say flies in the face.
Flies in the face. And that's exactly what they had. The ground. Have you ever had something, I mean, the ground seems to crawl, it seems to move. There's so much of something.
Yeah, it's called ants.
Ants.
Oh yeah.
Ants, cockroaches, flies, right? Just why is the ground moving? Ground isn't moving. It's what's on the ground that's moving, okay? How many of y'all remember seeing the Indiana Jones movie?
Yes.
Right? Why is the ground moving?
Yeah.
Oh, it's snakes, right? You remember how many snakes they had in there?
Yeah.
Right? Now that was just a little bitty area.
One was too much
Now,
for me.
flies across the land of Egypt. Okay? And so the ground seems to crawl. You can't eat or drink. They hadn't invented straws yet. Okay? But if you tried to drink something, what do you have to open to drink or eat something?
Your mouth.
Your mouth. There was enough flies.
To suffocate you.
That's right, they went into your mouth. Right?
You drink.
You couldn't keep them off your food. Right? How many of y'all have ever I'm just trying to get you in this mindset, set a cup down, right? Maybe it has a lid on it with a straw.
And your kid grabs it.
And so no, your kids don't grab it. But you finish it, right? You think, hey, that's a pretty good cup. I'm gonna refill that with some water, and you pull the top off of it and you look down in there, and there's a fly in the bottom of that cup. And you're like, I wonder how much he drank, you know? Right? But how does that make you feel? Right now, imagine they're all over your food. If you wipe them away, more fly in, right? You can't. If you get something cut, by the time, they're everywhere. They are everywhere, okay? Now, they crawl on you. They're in your nose. They're in your ears. They're in your mouth, right? We used to sing a little song about the worms. And in this case, it was the flies. You know, the flies crawl in, the flies crawl out. The flies crawl in and out your mouth, right? So they went everywhere. Mentally, this would have been an incredible burden to bear, all right? So now the specific type of fly is not mentioned in modern translations. But if you go back to the earliest Greek manuscripts, what they call the LXX, okay, it mentions the fly as being the dog fly, otherwise known today as the stable fly.
Horsefly.
Horsefly, okay? So, anybody ever seen a horsefly?
Yes.
I've seen a house fly. I've seen a house fly.
I haven't seen a house fly.
You haven't seen a house fly?
Yeah, on the news.
So
I've seen a house float.
a house fly cannot bite you. They can annoy you, but they cannot bite you. But a horsefly or a stable fly or a deer fly,
Oh, yeah.
right? Do you know what happens when they land on you? They take a sample.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
And so the dog fly was also known as a hard biting insect. So now we've got mosquitoes biting, followed by flies crawling everywhere. And it's entirely possible, according to some of the earlier manuscripts, that these flies not only annoyed you by crawling on you, but they could eat you, right? They took blood samples. And a horsefly could take a rather large blood sample, right? So these flies are more than just annoying, they're painful, okay? Now, guess what Egyptian culture has in its pantheon of gods?
A god fly.
A god of flies. Are you reading ahead? Yes, sir. No? You're going to hold off? Not that you're not going to let that one fly out of your mouth? Okay. You sure? I mean, give me some cover. Okay. All right. He's not going to let the axe fly off the handle. All right. So we actually had a couple of gods in this arena in Egypt. Right? Now, I don't know. Has anybody ever heard this before about the gods that were the subject of some of these plagues? No? Okay. So we tend to think of it because we watch the movies, right? And we think, okay, it was just afflictions on people, but it was, but it's also an attack on their belief systems. I've said this before. and a deeply held belief system, they are now being shown for how futile it really is. Right? How empty what they're doing is. So the Egyptian culture did have a god of flies. I actually had a couple of them, and I am not even going to try. Okay? That's their names. Now, the U name there was considered, get this, a protector of pharaohs. So he was a god who protected the divine Pharaoh on earth. Right? He looked after him. And he actually had a fly head. I've seen pictures of him. He had a little fly head, had wings. And so because he was a protector of the pharaohs, they would have little jewelry with a little fly. Had a little round part with two little triangles coming off. That was their symbol for a fly. And they had jewelry, necklaces, bracelets. It was actually a military award. If you were valiant in battle, you could have the award of the golden fly. Okay? So fly symbolism was very important in ancient Egypt. And yet, here they are making life miserable on an unimaginable scale. All right? And so this one was a protector of the pharaohs, and so it's believed that this plague by its nature is illustrating to Pharaoh he is not protected. Right? Because why? Well, first of all, he's just as afflicted as everybody else. But notice in the scripture, right? In your house and the houses of your officials, these are called out. These are specifically targeted. And then what did the flies do? They covered the ground, but what else did they do? They filled the houses. They filled the houses. Even Pharaoh's house, okay? Even Pharaoh's house. So maybe, just back up, maybe it's worse in the houses of Pharaoh and the government officials. Because the point is being made, your gods can't protect you from me. That would be the Almighty's message, right? I'm in charge, not these stupid critters that you've given imaginary powers to, okay? And so we see that these flies that go in the house, none of this, and the point here is, none of this is by happenstance. This is all by design. These plagues, they're not just, because we talked about this last week, right? Well, the water went bad, so the fish died, the frogs left the water. Well, no, you don't have that many frogs show up in 7 days, right? And then all the frog dies. Well, of course, then here come the flies. Well, okay, but again, it's way more than what normally, it would take weeks to cycle enough flies going through their breeding cycles to grow that exponentially, right? They suddenly appeared. And the mosquitoes, you said, well, the mosquitoes, because the water, when the water turned good again, the mosquitoes went back to breeding. Not that much, right? So the infestations, the magnitudes that are occurring here are unimaginable. They're unimaginable. But here, right, they infest the houses. Yeah, they're all over the ground, but in the houses, it's worse. All right? Now, we see that the land was in chaos. Right? It says through the land of Egypt into chaos. Chaos is a word that means ruined, corrupted, or spoiled. It ruined or spoiled or corrupted everything. Right? I'm trying to think how I can put it politely. Y'all know what a fly speck is? Flies do the same things every other animal does. They eat in one end. Yeah, okay. And you know what that looks like for one fly? It's a little speck. It's a fly speck. Now imagine, why are y'all giggling? This is like second grade. Imagine millions upon millions of flies eating and defecating everywhere. Fly specks. Right? It ruined everything. It corrupted it all. Okay? It spoiled it all. But we see a line now drawn, and we asked this question. This question was asked a couple of weeks ago. Well, what was going on where the Israelites lived, where the Hebrews lived? Here is the first mention of a distinction, quote unquote, a difference between the Hebrew inhabitations and the Egyptian, right? God said it will not happen there. Now here's what's not clear. Again, remember that in ancient storytelling, things might be mentioned once, not necessarily at the beginning, but they might be mentioned once in the course of a story, and it would be understood to be happening in every cycle. So what we don't know, what we can't be sure of, is whether or not the Hebrews, Moses and them, had to deal with the water, had to deal with the frogs, had to deal with the mosquitoes or the gnats. We don't know. But suddenly here, he says, this is not going to happen in my people's houses. They're not going to have flies.
Only happening with the Egyptians.
Only with the Egyptians. So it's like flies was in this house, but not in that house. Flies was at that end of the street, but not at this end of the street. Right? So we see this clear distinction. Now, what we don't know, again, like I said, is this is the first time, or if this is the first time it's being brought to Pharaoh's attention that there's been a difference. Pharaoh may have believed everybody was suffering. And so he was taking some solace in the fact that, well, you're doing this to your own people. And so God finally said, no, tell him that it ain't happening to my people. It's just happening to his people. Right? We don't know. Now, you can go a lot of different directions.
The Egyptians were eating the frog legs, Mom, not
The Hebrews wouldn't eat the frog legs. Frog legs would be considered unclean for them.
They're not kosher.
They're not kosher. That's right. Unless you put them in a pickle jar and you pickle them for a while. So it's not clear. Okay, it's not clear. Now you can go a lot of different ways with this, right? So you've got 3 plagues out of 10, right? Is that right? We got water, frogs, and gnats or mosquitoes. So we got 3 plagues out of 10, and then suddenly they're not being affected. Okay, so what examples can you draw from that? We can go back to Revelations. We can say, well, maybe some of the people of God will have to suffer through some of the trial and tribulation we see in Revelation. It's possible. I don't know that. It's also possible that they weren't suffering through any of this. It's just now being pointed out. So there's a big debate in the religious community. It's not clear. It's not clear. Okay? So if we want to draw some conclusions, we're going to have to use some additional scriptures to do that, which is outside the scope of what we're studying tonight. So no one knows for sure. All right. We do also see some compromise, right? We start to see some compromise. Pharaoh blinks, right? He blinks. He doesn't break, but he blinks. It doesn't last. He tries to negotiate. All right, if you want to worship, you'll do it here. Do it in the country, okay? And so this is classic satanic strategy, right? It is compromise. All right, so believe in God, but don't go to church. How many of y'all heard this, right? Oh, I believe in God, but Sunday is my only day to sleep late. Sunday is my only day that I get to relax. I don't know, what about Saturday? Oh no, I'm busy doing my stuff on Saturday. You're doing your stuff on Sunday too. Right? You're just picking to do no stuff. All right? So this is the compromise. Okay, believe in God, but don't go to church. Or, okay, so go to church, but don't quit doing, you fill in the blank. Right? We all have, listen, I'm going to tell you something. So we all have that one thing. Or if you're ambitious, maybe you have 2 or 3 that we like to do, right? That God really doesn't want us doing. But we can't help ourselves. And so And so Satan wants to use that, right? So I heard, and I may have mentioned this before, but I heard a really interesting analogy. Sin like that. So the Eskimos, so think about the Eskimos, whenever they had a wolf problem, wolves were sneaking in, killing their dogs and that kind of thing, they would take a knife. I'm not talking about a little bitty knife, I'm talking about, think K-bar, right? Big honking blade, and they would hone it to a razor's edge. And they would heat up some water over the fire, they pour it into the snow, they stick the knife down in there, they pack it and let it freeze solid with that knife sticking up. And then they would take seal's blood and they would pour it over the knife and let it freeze. And pour it over the knife and let it freeze until they had a thick coating of seal's blood on this knife. Right? And they just made them popsicle. How many of y'all, if y'all grew up, I know if anybody grew up in the 60s and the 70s, you remember the scare that went through Halloween, right? When people started putting razor blades in apples or other various fruit, right? Ruined Halloween, right? Somebody's put. So they would do that. The wolves would come in and the blood, right? They would start to lick the knife. And they would lick it until they had cut their tongues to ribbons. And now they had the warm taste of blood in their mouths. And they would continue to lick it until they had just completely amputated their tongues and their lips. And then they would wander off and bleed to death. Sin is like that. It attracts you in, right? You begin to lick the knife and you don't realize that the damage it's doing to you, because once you have that taste in your mouth, you can't taste whether it's the seal or you. You see what I'm saying? And that's how it destroys us. We do it to ourselves, right? And so that's the compromise. We have to fight against the compromise. Now, we don't point the finger at other people, right? You've got to fight again. I got my own compromises I got to fight with. Thank you very much. I ain't got time to judge you. You, I'm going to give grace to. I'm looking at you. I'm sorry. Y'all, I'm going to give grace to. Okay? Me, I got to fight that compromise in my own soul. I got to look at that and recognize that's a knife. Right? Like Crocodile Dundee would say, that's a knife. Right? And I got to avoid that. All right. So with God, how many of y'all have heard the saying, in for a penny, in for a pound? It's an English saying, pound is $1. Right? If you're in for a little, you're in for everything. You're either all in or you're not. And that's where we got to go with God. We got to go all in. But give it all. Okay? We got to give it all. All right. Then he says you can worship, but you got to do it here. Now, and Moses even brings this up. He says, look, we're going to be sacrificing animals. Right? And we'll get to this in the next couple of plagues. One of their sacred animals is a cow. And so they're going to throw a cow up on the altar and slit its throat right there in broad daylight in the middle of Egypt. Moses says, I don't think so. He said the Egyptian public would be outraged if we started killing their gods. Again, here we go. We're zeroing in on the fact that all of these plagues are not only affecting the physical, they're affecting the religious, the spiritual, the belief structures of the culture. Okay? And so that's what he says. He said, they're going to see us, quote, some foreign god, because that's what the Almighty was to the Egyptians, and they're going to stone us. They're going to rise up and kill us. And Moses sticks to his position. We've got to go 3 days into the wilderness. Pharaoh, again, negotiates. Okay, you can go for 3 days, but don't go far. Right? So think about this for a minute. 3 days into the wilderness. If I go 3 days into the wilderness, I have to travel 3 days to get back. That's how many days?
6.
That's 6 days. How many days am I going to worship? Oh, I've been gone a week and a half. Right? What Pharaoh's trying to do here is he's trying to get him to limit the distance he's going to be away from home so that if he has to chase him down, he doesn't have to go far. Well, you can go, but stay close. No. I got to go for...
He still wanted them as slaves.
Do what?
He still wanted them as slaves.
He still wanted them as slaves. Now remember, what was the basic fear? The basic fear was that they were going to conspire with the enemies of Egypt and come back in as a conquering army, right? That was the fear. So I got to keep them here so I can keep them under my thumb, all right? So he's cracking. His resolve is starting to break, but he ain't broke yet. Now Moses takes this deal. He says, okay, if you're going to let me out of the country, that's fine. He takes this deal because he knows once he gets out of the country, all bets are off. Right?
He really thinks Pharaoh's going to let him leave?
Well, see, I don't think he did. And I don't think he did because of the language he uses in his next statement. Okay? He knows if he gets out of the country, all bets are off. Now, Pharaoh knows this too. But remember we talked about Pharaoh. Pharaoh's a manipulator. Right? He'll say anything, get you to agree something. So he's going to play along with this. He also says here at this point, pray for me. Before it was pray for me and the people. Now he's just asking for what? Pray for me. It's become personal for Pharaoh. See, that's how we know he's being affected. So Moses agrees this time, but there's a warning. Lie to me, and it's going to get worse. So Moses was suspicious already, right? Pharaoh offered him this deal. Moses took the deal, but he warned Pharaoh, you're lying to me. It's going to get worse.
At the beginning of all this, God told Moses that it wasn't going to be easy.
That's right. He told Moses it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. He's going to, right? Remember what he said. I will have to show a mighty hand, which is basically, I'm going to have to bring my fist down on him. Boom! I'm going to have to bop him one, right? And so what he's doing is he's allowing God is allowing Pharaoh to believe his lies, Pharaoh's lies, right? His own gods are lying to him. His own faith, his own religious structure is lying to him. And so he's not only allowing Pharaoh to believe in it, he's actually allowing Pharaoh to dig into it because the disaster is going to be worse, okay? Now, so Moses agrees. Now there's a warning. You lie to me, and this is going to get worse. So we've had frogs. We've had mosquitoes, biting mosquitoes. We've had biting flies. What's worse?
At this point, I'm pretty sure Pharaoh doesn't
Things
know.
are going to start to die. Death. Things start dying in the next plague that we're going to get to. Okay? Things start dying. So up to now, it's been annoying, it's been aggravating, it's been a misery, but nothing has died. So Moses warns Pharaoh. He said, if you're lying to me now, it's fixing to get serious. Okay? And we'll see that in the next plague. So, but one final thought. This occurred to me as I was putting the finishing touches on this. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of good. This marks the second time Moses has prayed for Pharaoh's afflictions. Right? Pharaoh said, pray for me. The first time it was me and the people. And this time it was just pray for me. Right? He was tired of being afflicted. He was tired of the misery that he was in. And he asked for prayer. But notice that Moses Moses always agrees to pray for him. Okay? Moses doesn't say, nah, I'm not praying for
What
you.
says he wasn't praying for him the whole time?
Huh?
What says he wasn't praying for him?
Well,
the
what
whole
does say
time?
that? Because what I began to wonder is if this isn't an object lesson in mercy. Pharaoh is becoming or has become Moses' enemy, arch enemy. Okay? And so, but Moses pleads. Look at the language. He pleads for Pharaoh. Right? He doesn't go back and say, okay, God, you can stop the plague now. Pharaoh's agreed to go. Let us go. Right? He pleads for Pharaoh. Right? And so, is this an object lesson in mercy? Right? Perhaps to Moses, right? And perhaps to the readers of this story down through the ages. Because doesn't it sound familiar? Praying for one's enemy? What do you think? Huh? Does it sound familiar to pray for those who despitefully use you? Maybe it sounds familiar for praying for those who do not deserve to be relieved or to be blessed. Right? That you don't deserve God's favor. But yet, who is it that taught us all that? Hey, somebody we know? A couple of thousand years from this point in time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, come on.
Jesus.
Thank you. Jesus. This is an object lesson, I think, in mercy. Even though Moses and Pharaoh are this way, Moses doesn't hate him. Moses is praying for him. He's praying earnestly for him. We know that he's praying earnestly for him because what else does Scripture teach us about earnest prayers? Prayer of a righteous man availeth much. God is bringing judgment. And maybe the only reason these plagues stop is because Moses pleads. I think that's an aspect of the story we need to consider. And that is the end of the lesson. So tune in next week when we hear our hero ask, what is a rancher with no cows?
What's in ranchers with no cow?
Yeah, what do you call a rancher with no cows?